Louis XIV also commissioned the landscape designer André Le Notre to create the most magnificent gardens in Europe, embellished with gravity-fed fountains, statuary copying the finest Greek and Roman examples, basins, canals that could actually house historic war vessels and create the battle for entertainment. Geometric flower beds in the form of mazes for residents' entertainment, and groves of exotic trees which each have been grafted from known important examples from around the world. He also added two grottos in the Italian style, and an immense orangery to house the fruit trees, as well as a zoo with a central pavilion for exotic animals from around the world. After Laval's death in 1670, the work was taken over and completed by his assistant, François d'Orbais. The first floor, which is the second floor in the U.S. of the new palace, contained two symmetrical sets of apartments. One must remember that an apartment was essentially a very large bedroom only, not as we think of it today. No bathrooms existed, only the use of chamber pots, and no kitchen existed. Only a central dining room in the palace where everyone would eat, and only isolated by the king and queen had their own eating situation. One apartment for the king and one for the queen overlooking the gardens. These two apartments were separated by a marble terrace, overlooking the central garden with a fountain in the middle. Each of these apartments was connected with the ground floor by a ceremonial stairway used for watching the king and queen descend in the presence of foreign dignitaries. Each of these had additional rooms lined in a row: a vestibule, a room for the guards, an antechamber, a chamber, and a large cabinet or office, a smaller bedroom for mistresses and or for lovers, and a smaller cabinet for supplies. On the ground floor, under the king's apartment, was another apartment the same size, designed for his private life and decorated in the theme of Apollo, the sun god, which was his personal emblem. Under the queen's apartment was the apartment for the Grand Dauphin, the heir to the throne. This would have been their child, their male child. The interior decoration of the palace was designed by Charles Lebrun. Lebrun supervised the work of a large group of sculptors and painters called the Petite Académie, who crafted the ornate walls and ceilings. Lebrun also supervised, designed, and installed countless statues in the garden. The grand stairway to the king's apartment was redecorated almost as soon as it was completed with inlaid plaques of colored marble and trophies of arms, tapestries, and small balconies, so the members of his court could observe the processions of the king. In 1670, Laveau added a new pavilion northwest of the chateau called the Trianon for the king's relaxation in the hot summers. It was surrounded by flower beds and covered entirely in blue and white porcelain tiles, in imitation of the chinoiserie style. The enlargement of the palace, which occurred in 1678 through 1715. The king increasingly spent his days within the palace of Versailles, almost becoming a full-time resident, and the government, courtesans, numbering 6,000 to 7,000 persons, crowded into the buildings. The king ordered a further enlargement to his entrusted architect, Jules Mansart. Mansart added two large new wings on either side of the original royal courtyard. He also replaced Laveau's large terrace facing a garden on the west with what would become the most infamous of the palace, the Hall of Mirrors. Mansart also built the Petit Écuyer and the Grand Écuyer, which is the stables, so the large and small stables, across from the place of arms on the eastern side of the chateau. The king wished a quiet place to relax from the ceremony of the court. In 1687, Mansart began the Grand Trianon, or Trianon du Marbre, a marble trianon. The entire place is made out of marble, replacing Laveau's 1668 Trianon de porcelain in the northern section of the park. In 1682, Louis XIV was able to proclaim Versailles his personal residence. and the seat of the government was able to give rooms in the palace to almost all of his courtiers and nobles from around the country. After the death of Marie Therese of Spain in 1683, Louis XIV undertook the enlargement and remodeling of the royal apartments in the original part of the palace. Within the former hunting lodge, built by his father, he instructed Mansart to begin the construction of the Royal Chapel of Versailles, which towered over the rest of the palace. Mansart died in 1708. The chapel was to be completed by his assistant Robert de Cotte in 1710.